Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another week of Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson back with you for another conversation with a great sportscaster tonight. Really looking forward to this one. We have another football show coming up for you. I'll be joined here momentarily by my guest for this evening's show, Matt Baker. Matt is the communications and content manager for the BC Lions of the Canadian Football League. They're presently getting ready for the start of the 2021 CFL season. Training camp is firing up in Kamloops. They've just announced a new broadcast rights deal. So there's some football stuff to get into as it pertains to the Lions. And then we'll get into Matt's story. And Matt has about a decade of broadcast experience in the Vancouver sports market. A lot of time with the old 1040 radio station, where he's covered the Vancouver Canucks 2011 Cup Finals run. He's covered in his career. He's covered 5 Super Bowls. So a lot of the stories and things to get into, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun with it, and I'm sure he has a thing or two that we can learn from as well. So we look forward to getting into it with Matt. Before we step aside and take our first break here and then bring in Matt on the other side, we'll remind you that we broadcast live every Friday, 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern on astvproductions.com. Also up on Facebook, and those locations are where you can find all of our shows and live game broadcasts across the ASTV Productions network. And we're also on Twitter for further updates as well. And at those locations is where you can find our archives to all our past shows as well. So we're going to step aside here for our first break, and on the other side, I'll bring in our guest this evening, Matt Baker. Thanks so much for watching Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. And once again, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson with you, and joined now by our guest for this evening's show. It's Matt Baker from the BC Lions. Matt, thanks so much for coming on with us.
Hey, Jonathan, my pleasure. Good to be here.
Now, where are you? That looks like a pleasant backdrop you've got there. Where are you joining us from?
Hey, it's real. It's not one of those virtual deals that we've been having fun with. This is real horticulture right here on my back deck. At home in Burnaby here. Heading up today, actually Friday, later on, as we're doing this Friday. So, yeah, it's been a quiet couple weeks of home quarantine, as they say. Everyone's got to follow these protocols, but getting excited, but just enjoying my last little bit of time here at home with the family before heading up to camp for about, I guess, 19 days or whatever it is.
Yeah, and we alluded to some of the things that we need to get into here today with some Lions business, but it's an exciting time for everybody, I would assume. As you mentioned, heading up to training camp here very soon. Just how exciting is it after all that we've all been through the last year or so? How exciting is it to have football to get ready for now?
I don't think exciting even begins to describe it, Jonathan. And I've kind of thought it probably still won't really hit me until, well, maybe when I'm driving up on the Coquihalla later tonight. But when the team's on the field, when practice starts and stretch and they're listening to music and guys are yelling, the first couple days of practice, I believe, will be non-padded. So it might not really feel quite real until day 3-4. When the first padded practice goes, that's when guys really get jacked up. But yeah, it might hit me Sunday when the team's on the field for the first time. Might potentially get a little emotional because this last 17, 18 months, whatever it's been, the COVID world is what it is, but this organization has certainly been through a lot. I mean, we lost our owner, David Braley. The season getting canceled was a gut punch in itself. We had a general manager leave and lost a couple good players to free agency. That's the same in any given year, but yeah, it's gonna be definitely exciting come Sunday, Monday when we get really into the groove of things in Kamloops.
And you were talking about a couple of roster things there, and I had Dave Campbell on last week from 6:30 Ched in Edmonton, the color analyst for the Edmonton Elks, and we were just reflecting on the change that he's had even in the last few weeks from covering bigger picture, real world things. With all that everybody's been through with COVID and COVID updates as they relate to the CFL, now it's back to a lot more football stuff, roster stuff. And you as the communications manager and also the content manager for the Lions, how much fun is it to just be concentrating on football and talking football right now?
Yeah, I'll probably echo what Dave was saying. From my perspective, June 14th was the day we officially got word that, we're going to camp. We're playing a 14-game season. It seems right from that day on, someone flipped a switch. Like all of a sudden, it's starting to plan training camp, help sort out the roster, deal with the various transactions. The BC Lions, fortunately, haven't been hit quite as hard in terms of these. A lot of these veterans are retiring kind of left, right, and center. I mean, you mentioned the Edmonton Elks. They're one team. I think I saw Tommy Draheim earlier this week was another one that decided to pack it in at least for 2021. But yeah, it's definitely exciting. I mean, it was a good challenge for myself throughout this whole extended off season, really, because on the content side, even though we're not playing, we're still trying to tell stories. We're still trying to keep the Lions in the limelight, and was able to kind of do a lot of that. Was able to pump out some content for our podcast at bclions.com first and now. It's you can find that on all the major podcast platforms as well. But yeah, it's definitely nice now to be doing this, knowing that we're off to training camp and we're going to be in Saskatchewan playing a regular season game in like 27 days. So that to me still seems a long way off, but trust me, that's going to get here before we know it. So yeah, definitely someone flipped a switch, and it's good that we're sort of feeling normal again.
And you talk about telling stories there, and it seems like that's what it comes back to for all of us, whether we're in broadcasting or in communications, is we're all, when it boils down to it, we're all storytellers. And you guys, the Lions, earlier this week announced that you have two of the best storytellers for the club back in the fold with the announcement of the Lions' new broadcast partnership with Chorus Entertainment. Bob Marjanovic and Julio Caravata will be back on the broadcast crew this season. What can you tell us about the details of your new broadcast arrangement?
Yeah, I think you hit the solid points there. And yeah, I neglected to mention that was another just unpredictable thing that happened. Unfortunately, TSN 1040 was discontinued, and that's another story for another day, talking about how that whole thing went down. As someone who used to work there, that was tough for me for a couple days. And yeah, and that meant we needed to find a new platform, not a new platform, but a new partner. And yeah, this one ticks a lot of boxes. We have Bob and Julio back, outstanding duo in the booth. We're going to be on a network that does pretty well as far as reach and listenership, viewership too, if you factor in global television here in Vancouver. So as sad and as unexpected as that was to have all that happen with 1040 back in February, things happen for a reason, and this will allow us to continue to extend our brand reach and have a great duo still calling the games on radio. I mean, sadly, I'm down. I'm in the fire. I'm in the action. I can't actually listen, but I know for our fans who do like to listen, it's not just the game; it's the pre and post game show. So home games, fans driving to BC Place. Our president, Rick Lawlisher, has said this over and over again. He considers game experience starting from when fans leave their door to go to BC Place, whether that's driving downtown, taking the SkyTrain in, and now you can listen on these things, right? Your apps. So we're very happy, although it won't quite be what it was. It'll be an hour of pre and post, I believe, but still, that's going to be key in terms of getting that content and telling those stories, because we're going to want to hit the ground running here when we start talking about our first game August 6th.
And with the landscape in terms of the way fans consume the games now, sport across the sports world, and the fact that you guys, the Lions, are a provincial team, how important is it? And you touched on some of it, but you guys really have to be creative with how you get your games and get your content to the fans. And I see in your announcement that it's not just the traditional, the games are on this station and tune in at game time. You've got TV coverage, you've got games on the radio, you've got different affiliates to get it spread throughout the province. How important is it in today's sports landscape to be really creative with getting your product to the fans in different ways?
It's huge. And yeah, you said it. We're the BC Lions, and I know we'll see for a fact when we go to Kamloops, so we're not going to have fans allowed to watch until week 2. But yeah, Kamloops is a 3.5-4 hour drive away, and when we get there, we feel the presence. We see people out in the town and at Hillside Stadium in Lions gear. And I feel sorry. Like, one of the big things, unfortunately, being the only West Coast team means we get a lot of the 7 o'clock, 7:30 kickoff times, right? Because naturally that makes us a choice for the second half of TSN doubleheaders. And, you hear from the great fans who come over from the island who want to come over for an early game and then catch a sailing home. It doesn't necessarily work. And yeah, feel bad for them. Definitely. That's just an example of who we hear from. It's not just Vancouver. It's the Lower Mainland. It's the island. It's the interior. It's Northern BC. It's and I mentioned how we can listen on our phones now and on our computer if you want. I mean, that's key. You don't have to be in the Vancouver market to listen to a game on the radio. So that's a big reason why we value the talent with Bob and Julio, and there'll be some other stuff too. I mean, I've worked with Julio for a long time, and we'll be doing some stuff cross promotion on our website, bclions.com, as well, and we'll be plugging the broadcasts on their AM 730 Chorus Radio Network. So yeah, it's a win-win from all angles when you really add it all up. And yeah, you're right. It's the onus remains on us to keep pumping out content and keep being original in our content, because the declining state of the local media is another big factor. And, even though we work for a team and we may not necessarily get to cover it from the same perspective as traditional media, it's about keeping our fans informed, and that's what we try to do.
For sure, and we look forward to the Lions opener in Saskatchewan on August 6th. It starts for real. But we're going to take our first break here on Behind the Mic, and when we come back, we'll turn our attention more to your career and your story that was rooted in the broadcast industry in Vancouver. Some great things to get into when we come back. Thanks for watching Behind the Mic here on ASTV. We'll be right back with Matt Baker. And back here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions, Jonathan Hodgson in conversation this week with Matt Baker, the Communications and Content Manager with the BC Lions. We touched on some of the important details with the new season coming up. And as we alluded to in that first block, Matt, your career is rooted in the broadcast industry before your chapter with the Lions in communications. Spending about a decade in the Vancouver media, in the Vancouver media, a lot of time with 1040 that we spoke about in that first block. But I want to go back a little bit before that and just get a sense of your connection to the Vancouver sports scene. Did you grow up a Lions fan? Did you grow up a Canucks fan? Just kind of give me a sense of what got you into sports.
Yeah, pretty much born and raised here. Grew up in North Delta, so Greater Vancouver. And yeah, my dad, big sports fan, still is. And yeah, just one of your typical dads has a young son and wants to make sure they're interested in sports. So yeah, my dad was taking me to Canuck games, Lions games from the age of 6, 7. Actually, a big reason I first got into the Lions was because my grandparents had season tickets. So when BC Place opened in 1983, I wasn't born yet, but they were high on the priority list when BC Place opened. Right, that's how far back they went. So they started taking me to games in the Doug Flutie year here in 1991, and I always say like, that year didn't produce a championship, but if you're a young kid or someone first getting into the Canadian game, that's a perfect that's a perfect gateway to be a fan. So yeah, I was hooked right away and was always whenever my mom took us shopping at Safeway, I knew it was a chance if I behaved well to come out of there with a pair of $9.99 end zone tickets. Back then, you'd go to Safeway, buy the tickets, and yeah, Doug Flutie, that whole era got me going. And the '94 team, very near and dear to my heart. Guys like Corey Philpott and Ray Alexander, Darren Flutie after Doug had bolted, of course. Yeah, so it was a pretty exciting time in Greater Vancouver to be a sports fan. I mean, we had the Grey Cup that year. Canucks, yeah, 1994 Stanley Cup final came within a goal of forcing overtime, Game 7. And we're still waiting for a Stanley Cup. And yeah, I mentioned the Doug Flutie angle. So that same year, I first really started following the Canucks, and that was Pavel Bure's rookie season. And you talk to any fan who suffered before that, they would say like there was nothing for 20 years other than maybe Stan Smeal as a guy that would have got them excited. I know they had a bit of a run there to the Cup in '82 as well, but outside of that, it was nothing. So, and now I laugh at some of the younger folks who have gotten into the Canucks and they say that oh, these are tough times. I'm like, you trust me, like. There were some worse times in this, but yeah, big Canuck fan, big Lions fan as far as the local teams go, and still am, obviously.
So what did it feel like? What was the experience like when you got to take that fandom and channel it a little bit as you started to cover the Vancouver sports scene on the radio? What was that like going from fan to now it being your job to cover the teams that you grew up with?
Well, at first, I'm sure any sports fan who gets into the business would tell you this. At first, it's a little hard. At first, forget the first time I was in the Canuck locker room after covering a game. Admittedly, I was a little weirded out, a little starstruck, and then I realized, okay, you're here to do a job, you're here to be professional, but you quickly get over that hump. But yeah, it's weird. I've kind of gone from fan to reporter, and now I'm both, right? Like it's great. I openly cheer for the Lions because I'm allowed to. I work for the team. I mean, that gets back to before the break when I was talking about how, yeah, it's tough because you can't really cover it the way you would if you were in the media. That's not a complaint. That's just the way it is. But yeah, knew from a pretty young age it was the type of career I wanted to pursue. Used to stay up late at night watching the old local TV show Sports Page. Guys like Don Taylor, John Shorthouse, Barry McDonald, the late, great Paul Carson, who played a big role in getting 1040 on the air here some 20 years ago. So I knew very quickly that was something I wanted to pursue. Played sports growing up, football, baseball, basketball before I hit my growth stunt. In like grade 8, grade 9, volleyball, same thing. So knew quickly I wasn't going to get paid to play, but I knew I wanted to work in sports and did 2 years at BCIT and Back then, 2007, I graduated. I think it's a bit different now. Back then, before all these internet and digital platforms and podcast angles came up, our instructors are like, yeah, you got to go to a small town, make your mistakes on the air where no one will hear you, kind of thing. And was prepared to do that, but was lucky. Barry McDonald, one of the names I mentioned there, was someone I'd sort of had as a mentor, and he sort of wrangled some part-time work for me, and it's slowly but surely turned into a full-time gig, producing, hosting shows, covering events. So was lucky to get a foot in the door and kind of keep it there for a while.
During your 8 years or so at 1040, you were a show host, producer, reporter for a whole bunch of different things, and one of the headline things for a lot of fans, I would think, was the 2011 Canucks finals run, Stanley Cup finals run. What was your involvement in covering that run?
Yeah, it's 10 years. We just passed the 10-year anniversary of a pretty exciting year in Vancouver for football and hockey. You're right. So 2011 playoffs, my main role at the station at that time, I was producing Afternoon Drive with Pratt and Taylor. That was still is my favorite show all time as far as radio shows go here in Vancouver. Two great guys, two consummate professionals. It was your classic good cop, bad cop setup at times, but it worked. I mean, ratings and revenue that year were outstanding. And so luckily, I was basically off work an hour before puck drop at every game. And it's an all hands on deck kind of thing too. So I worked a couple games in the Nashville series in round 2, and I worked one of the San Jose series games in round 3, Western Conference Final. Was lucky to attend game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final as a fan with tickets. That was remarkable. That was the night Alex Burrows scored 11 seconds into overtime, and it's like, oh my God, it's going to happen. Like, there's no way they're going to lose 4 out of 5. So the rest, as they say, is history. But yeah, it was a good, looking back on that, I enjoyed it. I was able to enjoy it from a working perspective during the day. Going to work every day was awesome, knowing that you're talking hockey, you're talking Canucks, they're in the Stanley Cup Final, making this run, and it was kind of that good mix of working in an exciting environment during the day, then being free to go home and watch the games or attend the games at night. So that was a pretty fun spot to be for most of that 2 months. Didn't end too well, but yeah, that's memories I will cherish forever.
And another one of the bigger resume items for you as well was your chance to cover 5 Super Bowls, and that's a really interesting one for me. Tell me about how that opportunity came about to cover Super Bowls.
Yeah, that one, that's a full credit, ironically, to our current radio voice of the Lions, Bob Marjanovic. He started taking his show down to Radio Row at the Super Bowl, I want to say around the turn of the century. Like, I think maybe Ravens Giants in 2001 would have been his first. And credit to the man, he would always go by himself, no producer, no engineer, pre-tape a bunch of interviews, either edit them or send them back to the station, and he'll chuckle about it if he asks. I think he had some technical glitches along the way, and I think at one point he's like, you know what, if I want to do this right, I got to bring a producer. So I work closely with him at 1040, producing his shows in the evening mainly, and so he was able to get me down there, for 5: Dallas, Indianapolis, New Orleans, New York, Phoenix. So was in the building, so for example, Seahawks, Patriots, the interception at the 1-yard line, was in the building for that, sat up high in the end zone where that happened in the auxiliary press box. Year before that was, or I guess 2 years, I missed New York was the other one I did there. Yeah. So, and before New York was in New Orleans, 49ers, Ravens. I'm a fan of the 49ers, so that was kind of cool being there for a Super Bowl they were in, even though they lost. It was in the Superdome for the power outage. So Yeah, it's that was a lot of work. And Moj would tell you this. The real highlight is the week, Radio Row, seeing all the big name talk shows in the U.S. down there. Guys like Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, Rich Eisen, just to name a few, and seeing all the big name guests that roll through. Guys like Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Franco Harris. The list goes on. That was the highlight. I mean, that aspect of it. The game was fun. But, I mean, the game is just as enjoyable on television, I find. But, yeah, definitely a highlight. And I'll always be grateful for Moj for helping provide some of that opportunity, because that was a pretty fun time in my career.
Absolutely. Good times for sure. All right. We got to take one more, take our next break here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions. And we'll be back with one more segment with Matt Baker from the BC Lions here. And back here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions, Jonathan Hodgson with you in conversation this week with Matt Baker, the Communications and Content Manager for the BC Lions, getting ready for their season opening up on August 6th and just about to head up to training camp in Kamloops. Had a good time in the first block talking about the Lions, and then started to dive into Matt's career in the broadcast industry and talked a lot of football, a little bit of Canucks. But there's one thing that I wanted to touch on that's kind of close to my heart, as you, in your early days in broadcasting, you got to cover the Vancouver Canadians for a year or two. When they were formerly at the low A level of the minor leagues. What do you remember about covering the Canadians at Nat Bailey Stadium?
Oh, that was my foot in the door, right? Quick backstory as to how it all worked out. I was still taking part-time classes at BCIT, wasn't accepted full-time until the fall, and a classmate of mine had told me she'd applied to be a summer media intern, and she's like, there's openings. Okay, that might be cool. So I went down, I got the interview, went down to Nat Bailey, and was interviewed by, at the time, Leanne Caisse was the media relations director, and we're sitting there in the stands doing this interview, and she's looking at my resume, and she says, it kind of looks like more you're interested in broadcasting. We're hiring a broadcaster, right? And I didn't know that. So she's like, yeah, I mean, I'd encourage you to apply for, at the time, the term webcaster was kind of new. Okay, they're doing games on the internet. So submit an application, was invited back to basically audition. And how that was set up, the general manager of the team at the time was a gentleman by the name of Delaney Dunn, and I'll be forever thankful for him. So basically I was facing the TV. They had a baseball game on, and did about an inning of play-by-play. I submitted demo tape before that of myself calling a taped Mariners-Angels game on TV. I'll never forget submitting that. So I did that. Yeah, we like what we hear, and we'll be in touch, kind of thing. And long story short, they ended up hiring myself and someone to do color. A great friend of mine, one of my best friends still to this day, Rob McGowan, was selling beer at Nat Bailey, still does sell beer at Nat Bailey, but due to some medical issues at the time, he wasn't able to lug cups of beer for 3 hours, 38 days in the summer. So he wanted to contribute somehow, and he looked into the broadcast gig, and I guess they liked the both of us, and they hired us. So I called 2 years of professional baseball starting at the age of 21. And, Rob was there providing color. It was fun stuff. It was professional most of the time. It was fun the other time, but that was a great way to get into the business. I got to ride the bus across the Northwest League at the time. Saw some interesting places. Yakima, Washington. I recommend checking that place out if you're ever out in the Northwest. Sarcasm aside, wouldn't have traded it for any experience. And I'll tell you, I was going into my first year of full-time school, and I remember thinking, you know what? Is it more beneficial maybe to find a paid job this summer, make some money? Because I'm not going to be making money in September. I have to thank my parents, Mike and Marie Baker. Was living under their roof at the time, and they're like, you know what? Do this. This is your career. This is what you want to do. You've got the rest of your life to make money, and we're always here for you. So, 2005, 2006 seasons was interesting to follow and track some professional baseball prospects at the start of their careers, and to see some interesting spots as well. That will forever be a great memory of mine as well. Those 2 summers.
I've called games in Yakima for Vancouver Island University when they did their spring exhibition swing down to Washington State. So I know what you're talking about.
Yakima County Stadium was the one, right? Yep.
And the college used a second field across town, but I've been to the big stadium, and now the West Coast League Summer League team is in there.
Right. Sadly, they lost the Yakima Bears. They're now in Hillsboro, which ironically is where the Canadians have set up shop until this border gets reopened. But Yakima, Eugene, Oregon was a favorite of mine. Boise, despite the 13-hour bus ride, whatever it was. Never forget being put up downtown Boise for a 5-game series. And you find a bar that's doing dollar beers. So per diem's $20 a day. I'm pretty set here, just Salem Kaiser. Everett was even though Everett, Washington, just a couple hours down the road, not even a couple hours down the road once you cross the border, that was a place that is so close, but never knew too much about it. So you learn there's a lot of military history in that part of Washington State, and you're close to Seattle too. So Rob and I even swung it a couple times to catch a Mariners game at noon and then go back up to Everett and call the Canadians game. So lifelong memories.
Yeah, for sure. And Rob Fay has turned into one of my really good friends in the business, and he's a friend of this show. Was one of my very first people I had on, and
friend of all of us.
My nightly routine for months when I sparked up this show was doing my prep work late at night, listening to Rob Fay's nighttime show on 1040. Before he transitioned it into his podcast work that he's doing now and streaming work. You mentioned a few times that your Canadians time was right about the time you were cutting your teeth in the industry and trying to make inroads, get into it. What would you say? Would you have any words of advice for whether it be student broadcasters or people who are thinking about getting into the broadcast industry? What did you pick up at that point in your career that you would that you would tell the other people who are trying to get into it?
I just say pursue it and be versatile. I mean, I talked a bit about how times have changed. I mean, nowadays you have broadcasters who write, you have writers who broadcast. And at that point, in that period of time, this is what I want to pursue, baseball. Maybe if there's one regret I have, maybe I should have pursued a bit more junior hockey or something like that. But my advice would just be do what you can. If you can write, you'll always find work somewhere in the industry. If you're doing sportscasts, a well-written sportscast goes a long way. And I won't mention names, but I listen to radio sportscasts that are poorly written, and I think, man, like you could save yourself a lot of time and get more info in if you just kind of, tighten it up a little bit. So yeah, learn how to be a writer, learn how to be an editor. If you're going into broadcasting, pick up some video skills, pick up some graphic skills. We're in the era now where the more skills you have, the more avenues you can pursue. So I guess be versatile is what I would say mostly.
Yeah, and through the course of this show, I've been fortunate to meet a whole bunch of really great people in the industry, and it seems to be a common thread that the best broadcasters are also some of the best people and some of the most willing people to lend their time and to lend their, to lend an ear or to, do a little bit of shop talk with. Were there other people? Were there people for you who were perhaps more established in the industry that were sort of mentor types for you?
Yeah, I mentioned Barry McDonald. I mean, that was my main foot in the door to 1040. Everyone I worked with at 1040, BMAC, Pratt and Taylor for a spell, and you mentioned great people. Don is one of the best guys you'll ever meet. I don't know if you met him, but you talk to him off the air, he's the same guy as he is on the air. Not everyone's like that, but yeah, Pratt, Taylor, BMAC, Moj did a lot for me. Always kind of looked up to those guys. And guy like Jeff Patterson, too, who's talk about versatility. I mean, he's a good writer. He's a great reporter. He's a good host. His play-by-play, I imagine, is pretty good, too. He did the Kamloops Blazers back in the day. So that's another guy who's helped me out along the way and taught me a lot of pointers about how to stay employed and how to stand out.
And since we brought it up a few times here, we'll get you out of here in a minute or two. But we've talked a lot about 1040 radio. Started as Team 1040, became TSN 1040 before it closed up a few months ago. That's not important for this conversation, but I've heard as a BC transplant myself, I grew up in Alberta and transplanted to Vancouver Island a few years ago and spent a lot of time listening to Vancouver sports media and sports radio. And that was, as I mentioned, Rob Fay was kind of my first experience with it. And I've heard a lot from Rob and from even watching Don Taylor and Rick Dollywall on their show now on Check, just the reverence that people had for what 1040 was, what it accomplished, the people it pushed out. Where does that reverence come from in the market for 1040?
Well, I think it's just the fact that pretty much all those guys that you speak of that have landed on their new gig, a lot of those guys carved their niche and developed a brand and developed an audience. So I'm sure it's not as simple as them retaining all their audience from radio, because simply not everyone who listens to radio is up on these current trends. But I would bet Pratt and Taylor, Sakaris and Price, Donnie and Dolly, Rob Fay. I mean, if you look at, I would imagine their show numbers and downloads are pretty solid, and that just speaks to how well they did at sort of establishing their brands and retaining an audience. So, yeah, was not a good day in the industry at all that day when 1040 abruptly stopped. But for some people, it's been a blessing in disguise because it's allowed them to carry on their shows under a non-corporate umbrella, so to speak.
For sure. So as we look ahead, as we mentioned off the top of the show, the Lions start up on August 6th at Saskatchewan. The home opener is August 19th against the Edmonton Elks. We mentioned that you're the content manager for the Lions as well, so you contribute to the Lions website, also to CFL.ca. Are those the main points where people can see your work?
Yeah, bclions.com. All our content, all our camp info is there. Download our podcast First and Now. And you mentioned a lot of it gets picked up on CFL.ca. So, yeah, tell a friend and make sure you check us out.
All right, sounds great. And catch the games with Moj and with Julio Caravata as well. All right, Matt, thanks so much for joining us this week. I know it's about to be a busy time, and you squeezed in some time for us, so I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, man.
Hey, Jonathan, my pleasure. Keep up the good work yourself, and call on us anytime.
Appreciate it. Will do. All right, we will step aside one more time, and I will be back for the wrap up here for another week of Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions.
Welcome to Pilot-Mound Hockey-Academy, your world-class academic and hockey training facility created to maximize each student's athletic and academic potential. Blackjack Stewart Arena, home of the Buffalo, is inside the 46,000 square foot complex, as well as a curling rink and other facilities. The students have a unique combination of successful, well-rounded education at Pilot-Mound Collegiate Institute and the professional hockey training in an encouraging community. The years of experience of on-ice coaching propel our students to the next level, both mentally and physically, in a professional environment.
Welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Just finished our chat with Matt Baker from the BC Lions, their communications and content manager. Had a great chat with him, catching up on the state of the Lions as they get ready for training camp over in Kamloops, getting ready for the CFL season that kicks off on August 6th. And they've just secured a new broadcast rights deal as well. So we look forward to the upcoming CFL season for the Lions. Thanks to Matt for chatting with us about that a little bit, and then going into his story covering the Vancouver sports scene on radio with TSN 10, with Team 1040 and TSN 1040, and also a little bit of his time with the Vancouver Canadians. Enjoyed the chat. Hope you did too. And we look forward to doing more of these every week, every Friday, 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 Eastern. We chat with a sportscaster every week about their teams, about their sport, and about their career. And we can share with you already. Usually we wait a couple of days before releasing our new guest for the next week, but we can share with you that we are working on a show headlined by Darren DuPont next week. Darren is co-host of the Rod Peterson Show on Game Plus, of course, alongside Rod Peterson. And they just went out to Montreal for games 3 and 4 of the Stanley Cup Final and did live Rod Peterson Show broadcast from Montreal. So we'll have him on next week after the conclusion of the series to talk about the series and talk about the show's time in Montreal. And we're working on getting a second guest in for that show to complement what Dupes will bring. We've had him on one more time. He's always, we've had him on one time before, and he's always a great visit. Always have fun with him. So we look forward to Darren DuPont next week here on Behind the Mic. But for this week, that'll do it for one more week on Behind the Mic here on ASTV. Reminder, we're back every Friday, 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern, astvproductions.com, Amateur Sports TV on Facebook, and further updates are over on ASTV's Twitter page as well. So once again, thanks for watching wherever you've tuned us in from this evening. Thanks for making us part of your Friday night. Appreciate your viewership as always. And for another week, until next Friday, this has been Jonathan Hodgson, and for my guest, Matt Baker, thanks for watching, and we will talk to you again next Friday.